Hello Art 1-2 and welcome to your middle ground demonstration. So we first need to plan ahead a little bit, and so I like to, even though you answered the questions, I like to still write it on the paper to remind yourself as to what you're doing. Okay, so at the top we have our color scheme. I already planned out sky background, that's finished. Now I'm going to plan out middle ground. And I'm still going to go red violet, but I'm going to add a little bit of red, and then I'm going to leave the red and red orange for the foreground, but it'll be like a really deep dark like brick red because we're going to make it a lot darker for the foreground. So middle ground, red plus red violet. And so write down what colors you're going to use in your middle ground. Plus you have the option of a couple techniques. You can do wet on wet. So you could do a graded wash. You could do blotting a little bit because now we're getting a little bit closer. And this one in the middle ground, it's wet on dry. We're essentially doing this technique anyway. But I added a little bit of salt in the mountains right here. So I wouldn't do rice. This is the one that I just wouldn't do because it's too much detail, and I would save that for the foreground. But you could do salt. So whatever you're gonna do, have it all ready to go. So that you don't waste a lot of time. This one's pretty fast. So I have all my colors mixed. Now overnight they dried out, and so I just added water and kind of, just a bunch of water and then swirled it around. You have to kind of scrub it a little bit to get the pigment particles to reconstitute or mix in with the water. So get your colors all mixed up. I have mine. I also did mix, because I'm using that palette for 3 paintings, but I did mix in my tray a little bit. That's okay if you want to. You do need to clean it with a wet paper towel when you're done because you got it semi-clean. It should get returned semi-clean. Okay, so I'm going to do kind of like a graded wash with red and red violet and a little bit of wet on wet. And I want my next layer to be darker in value than my previous layer. So let me add a little bit more. I wonder if this is going to look red violet too, guys. Okay, so add a little bit more. And you could, I'm just going to kind of draw it on here. I realized that was like the same type of slope. Remember, we need to move fairly quickly. And so this is wet on dry. So it's wet paint on dry paper. Okay, so I'm going to add super fast. Super fast. Okay, water, just water on my brush. Grab some more water, pull it down so I can fade it down into the foreground, and then the foreground will cover that up. So remember, try to hold your paintbrush in the middle or towards the end so you're not pressing very hard. Okay, so since I want to do salt on this one, plus I'm going to add some red into this. So I'm going to add a little bit more water so I can just work a little bit more in this middle ground. I'm going to tap some water in there. Being careful not to get it, on my background, etc. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of red. I think I added a tiny bit of purple to this red, so it's not like super bright red, because I still want it to look like it's farther away. So your colors will go from like duller, less intense, to more intense. I'm just kind of fading down a little bit. Okay, so then I feel like I want to add a little bit more red violet, some darker. So remember, the more pigment you add, or the more you add of the watercolor, the darker it will be. Okay, so right now I'm going to grab my salt, put some in my hand, and I'm not going to sprinkle very much. I just want a little bit of texture in the mountains. So remember, salt, it needs to be like shiny wet. It needs to be pretty wet. So that's why I added like a little bit of water so that I would have like little puddles. And remember that I have to just let that dry. I have to leave it alone until it's totally dry, and then I can brush it off. So what that looks like, hold on, I have all this salt in my hand. I'm gonna need that from some other ones. So I just kind of like brushed off the salt off my technique. I brushed off the rice. But you still can kind of see a little bit of the salt. So I don't want to get a lot of salt down where the foreground's going to be. I just want it a little bit at the top of the peaks. Okay, so that one's done. So that's one middle ground example. And I'll do the water one too. So the water one will be last. You can fast forward until the water one comes if you don't want to watch all these. Okay, so this one, I actually cannot see where my middle ground was. So I am going to plan for it though, and I'll draw it in there. So middle ground. I'm going to go more like blue-green. And then I would have green up front. Or do I want more blue up front? I think I want more blue up front in this one. So actually, I'm going to go more green plus blue-green. And then my foreground, I'm going to go darker blue. Okay, so I have that one planned out. I'm going to use salt again and like some wet on wet. So I do want to draw my middle ground in here. I'm going to do just like another layer. Okay, that's good enough. All right, I have my green and blue green, so I have multiple greens already mixed up. So I'm gonna use these with some touches of the blue. Oh, that doesn't look green to you guys, sorry. Okay, so the key is to kind of like drag your brush along the edge, and you wanna like overlap your pencil a little bit. I mean, from far away, we're probably not going to be able to see the pencil, so make sure you draw super lightly, because we don't want to see it. And remember that you're going fairly quickly. And if you want to make it darker, you can always come back and add more. But we just want to get a clean line to start out with. Okay, so I'm going to go super fast. A little bit more blue-green, fading down, super quickly, so it doesn't dry like that, all outlined. I'm going to use just water on my brush. Just water. More just water. And I'm not pressing, you can hear it, but I'm not pressing very hard. Okay, fading water all the way down. Getting rid of that line. And I do have like a hair from the bristles. I'm just going to let it be there, and then I'll, fix it. I'll pull that bristle out. You can see it. It's like right there. Just let it be. Let it dry. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in and add, like maybe I want this mountain to be slightly darker. So I added a little bit of red to this green and a little bit of blue, but I red to dull it down so it wasn't bright green. Fade out a little bit. Okay, and then I feel like I'm going to add like a little bit of a brighter green to this one, but I'm going to kind of add a little, since this is where I started, I'm going to add a little bit of water. Just a couple brushfuls, and add in like, I mixed green with a little bit of yellow. I think I had a touch of blue in there too. So remember, you do need to mix your own colors so that your painting is more unique. And it looks, like a high schooler did it and not an elementary school person just digging paint out of the tray. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I have enough water for the salt. So I'm going to go back and add a little bit of water. I feel like this one's drying a little bit faster. You don't have to use salt if you like the way it looks right now. That's fine if you want to blot a couple different versions of your colors in there. Like I could have mixed like an even brighter green and added it. Maybe a little bit more of a turquoise bluish green. Okay, I'm gonna let that be. I'm gonna say that one's good. All right, now for the water one. So the water one's a little tricky because I do want it to be look all foamy and kind of white right here. So I'm gonna still avoid this part for the most part. I'll add like a little bit of value in. So we'll come back, we'll do another layer on the water just because we want like it to look like waves. But for right now, I already planned out my middle ground is gonna be red, orange, and pink. So the only thing I need to make is the pink. I apologize. I'm just gonna add a little bit more water to my red. And I'm gonna add a tiny bit of yellow so it's like a brighter. Ooh, that's way too red now, sorry. My tiny bit wasn't. Okay, like a brighter pink. Okay, so I do want some like white kind of frothy foam on the ocean to show. So I am gonna go back with my red and kind of add in a line, but then I'm gonna come back and like add water to it. So we're doing like another kind of layer of watery, and then I'm gonna kind of fade out just a little bit. And I'm gonna add, so I'm dunking my brush in, and then there might be too much water, so I'm gonna wipe it off on newspaper. So you can see where I wiped it off. So I can just kind of go back and blend in the lines to what I already have. All right, so now I'm gonna add a little bit of orange in there. And you can make it more wavy. Like maybe I do want to, actually. Make it look wavier, like it's moving as it gets closer to us. Okay, just like a few little lines. So I'm barely touching my brush to the paper, a couple of lines. All right, so I'm gonna do that on the other side, and I'm gonna use some of this color like down in here as well. And I'll probably put like a little bit in there, but you still want it to be kind of watery. So I'm gonna get a little water on my brush, wipe it off on my newspaper so it's not super watery, kind of go over those lines so it's loose. Okay. Okay, wavy, we want it to be almost the same level of waviness. I'll put a red. Okay, a couple lines, a little bit of orange in there, a couple lines of orange. Just kind of wiping off my brush, like it already has less paint. Okay, dunking my brush in the water. Oh, I wiped it off on the newspaper or tapped it on the newspaper. Let's see, I'm gonna add a little bit of waviness. Okay, so it's still loose. We'll do another layer of that. Okay, here, get a paper towel ready. So if you need to pause me. Where did I put my paper towel? I was ready. Hold on. Oh, there it is. Okay. I knew. I've gotten all set up. You probably will need like half of a paper towel. You probably don't even need that much. We're going to do like the same effect of the clouds, but down here, but with really, really light values. So I'm gonna first, and I have like some guidelines. I drew them in here. You can kind of see like where the waves were coming up to the shore. And we'll kind of work into this, but this is like the first layer. So it's kind of like the sky where you're gonna add water first. Okay, then I'm gonna kind of like leave some white paper, leave some white paper showing. So kind of just like a little bit of color. I'm actually gonna add just a tiny bit of yellow. Okay. I just ripped my paper towel in half. Okay, so a small little blotting. And you wanna do this while it's wet, so you don't want it to sit very long right there. You could also, I'm going to add a little bit of water, and I'm going to put salt in this as well. So that's all. I said I wasn't going to use salt, but I am. A little speckly. And then that will help us, that will give us some shapes to kind of enhance and go around. Just a second, let me get my salt in my hand. So notice how light in value that is. Like barely. And we'll fix the water. So just do another layer. You have to kind of build up layers when you do water. And if you are doing a river, obviously you don't have to do this white foamy or the foamy area. For the foreground, this actually will have another step because I'll do like the sand and then the foreground. So we'll probably lay a little bit of like sand layer in there and we'll blow dry it before we do the foreground. So this one will take a little extra time for the foreground. Okay, you guys, that's the middle ground. So keep it kind of loose, and this definitely is going to get another layer in the water. We'll put some layers in the highlight. So this one needs a little bit more. I was hesitant in showing you guys a water one, but there's so many cool ocean pictures online that I knew that somebody would pick water and the ocean. Okay, so that's your middle ground. Be thinking about, okay, what colors am I using in my foreground? They're going to be super dark. Not quite black, but super dark for the first layer. And like, what am I gonna draw? So if you still haven't figured that out or you've changed your mind, make sure you know, because the next step for all of them is gonna be to draw the foreground and then paint it in there.